Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you guys are having a great one. For today's Tech Thursday, we're at the OSS store, and I'm gonna be showing you guys how to remove, and then once you have regrets, how to reinstall your brakes. And I'm gonna be doing so on this 2016 Fit Brandon Began OSS collab bike. Yes, I know the 2017 models are out, and we actually have them right over there. But for today, I'm gonna be showing you guys on this bike just because it's our OSS Fit and Brandon Began collab bike, and I'm pretty fond of all three of those. So let's get to it. So this tutorial is gonna need the widest array of tools, both a 10mm wrench and an Allen key set. The reason I'm using a set is because you're gonna need both the 5mm and a 3mm to remove the brakes, the mounts, and any other tabs that there are on the frame. Before we begin, I want to run through and give you guys the names and what each of these components does on the brake system. So for starters, we have the brake lever. A lot of the newer bikes actually come with a very nifty feature, and these brake levers have a hinge here. So the cool thing is that all you have to do is remove this 5mm bolt on the backside and then unhinge this brake lever. The cool thing is that when you do so, you don't actually have to remove the grip and bar end like you did back in the day. Now on this brake lever, we have the actual lever piece, there's a spring on the inside, and we have a barrel adjuster. And the importance of the brake lever is that it regulates the distance of the actual pull on the whole brake. So I'll explain in further detail when we're actually installing the brakes. All right, so the important part of the barrel adjuster is that it has a slit right here, as you can see, and the locking piece of the barrel adjuster does so as well. And basically when you align these, it'll allow you to remove the housing of the brake cable, and then you'll have the brake cable exposed, and then you can pull it off the lever. As you can see, we have the brake cable, and like I said, it has an outer housing, and then the actual brake cable is on the inside, and it's basically just a braided wire that sits inside of the housing. And as you can see here, it moves all the way down, and then we have another barrel adjuster down here that actually sits against this tab on the frame. And this barrel adjuster also regulates the distance of the cable, and basically by having a barrel adjuster down here and a barrel adjuster on the lever, you have two adjustment points to really get your brakes nice and dialed. Next up, we have the straddle. And the straddle also has a bolt here with a hole in it, and then it has a nut underneath that you basically tighten down, and that holds the actual cable and allows for more adjustment. And then we have the straddle cable, and basically what this does, it loops around the seat tube, and then it has 2 points of contact here on your actual 990 brakes. Usually one side is open, so that means that it's just a cable, and again there's gonna be a bolt that has a hole in it where you actually run the wire through, and then it has a nut underneath that you tighten it. And on the other side, the cable actually has either a barrel or actually the hammer piece that's actually welded on the cable. So this just basically hooks on, wraps around, attaches to the straddle, and then gets bolted into the 990. And this, my friends, is a Tony in its very unhinged position. No, this is not magic. I really flipped the bike on the stand so I can show you the 990s and how they work. So again, these are 990 brakes. And basically how they work is there's a post here on the actual frame. Most 2016 and 2017 bikes have removable 990 posts, which are the thing that actually are attached to the frame. And then we have the brake system. So this is the 990 brake, this is the right arm, and then it features a bolt that holds the whole system, and there's a spring here, and this is a spring cap. And basically this will allow you to adjust the tension on your brakes. Followed by a brake pad, and the bolt and the washers that adjust the distance of the brake pad to the rim. All right, so now we're more familiar with all the brake components, their names, and what they do, and we have our tools in hand, let's begin the removal process. So I like to start by removing the 990 brake altogether. Usually when the bike is flipped upside down, you're gonna wanna remove the left arm first, followed by the right one. And the reason for that is the 990s cross on each other, and usually the one on the right goes underneath, and then the one on the left goes on top. So let's do that first. Okay, so remove your 5mm Allen wrench, and place it on the bolt, and then turn it counterclockwise. Okay, once basically you break it free, then the removal process is pretty easy. You're gonna give her about 5 or 6 good turns, and then you'll be able to loosen it by hand, all right? So on a traditional brake system, this bolt is part of the brakes, and you just remove it. But on the newer system, this bolt actually is part of the 990 post that threads into the frame. So this is gonna be a lot longer than traditional posts. So as you can see, this bolt not only goes through the brakes, it actually goes through this removable tab that's on the inside of the brake that is usually just gonna sit here on the frame. All right, so once you've removed the left brake arm, time to remove the right one. Same thing, place your 5mm Allen inside of the bolt, breaker loose, And once you do so, you should be able to give her 3 or 4 good spins and then remove it by hand. And voila. Okay, next up is removing the straddle cable. And basically this is done so, like I mentioned earlier, most of the straddle cables will either have a barrel or like this hammer piece on the very end that's welded onto the brake cable. And then on the other side, it'll be an open end where you can slip it through this bolt and then you cramp this piece onto the brake cable so that it doesn't fray. All right, so this is what the brake system looks like off the actual frame. And basically the straddle cable is the thing that's holding the two 990s together, and it pulls them and it causes them to actually like scissor clamp onto the rim. And to remove the straddle cable, you have 2 options. You can either undo the bolt on this side and pull the cable out, or what they've done to make it easier is there's a removable barrel here. And basically there's an opening at the bottom here where you just have to like pull the cable over the slit and then remove the barrel. And then that undoes them, and then you come here on the straddle and basically lift the brake cable and then pull the straddle cable from beneath, and voila, it's all removed. All right, next up is the straddle, and we can remove this by undoing this bolt and then pulling the cable from within this hole that's on the actual bolt itself and removing this little cap piece. But something that fits done to make your life a lot more easy is there's a slit in this tab here, and all you have to do is pull the barrel adjuster back and then pull the cable through the slit, and it's off the frame. Now to feel completely brakeless, you're gonna wanna remove this little tab. And all you have to do is use a 2.5mm wrench and basically unscrew that tiny little bolt, and your tab is right off. Last but not least, we have the brake lever. And again, all you have to do is use the 5mm Allen wrench, place it on the back here, breaker loose. About 4 spins later, then you can use your finger, pull the bolt, unhinge the brake lever, and then you can just pull it right off. Last thing holding her down is this little Velcro piece. Just undo that. Your brake cable is now free. All right, for those of you guys that have to replace your brake cable at some point, I'm gonna show you guys how to remove the cable from the lever. And that's easily done by, like I mentioned earlier, all you have to do is adjust this barrel adjuster to the point where all the slits line up. So as you can see, there's the adjuster piece here, and then the actual barrel here, and they both have a slit. Line those up. So basically you want the barrel, the adjuster, and the lever all to line up where the slit is nice and open, and then all you have to do is pull back the housing. That'll free the brake cable, and then you can pull it through the slit, and then what you have to do is kind of turn the lever downward, and you'll see when you pull the lever back, there's going to be another slit on the inside of the lever, and then you just basically align that with that slit and then remove it through the opening, and that's all you had to do. Now when installing the brake cable, same thing, pull the housing back, place the hammer here through the slit and the opening, and then basically turn it forward. Make sure the adjuster and the barrel all line up, and then turn it, and then push the housing back into the barrel adjuster, and you're all set. Now let me show you guys how to install the brakes. And for the installation, we're gonna need a few more tools, so let me give you guys a rundown. So as I mentioned, you're gonna need some wire cutters, a 13mm wrench, a 10mm wrench, a 5mm Allen, and a 2.5mm Allen, as well as some grease. All right, so for starters, you're gonna wanna install the 990 mounts. And again, these are removable. So basically this post sits on the frame, and it's gonna have a concave surface. So basically this will just sit really nicely over the convex side of the actual seat stay. And then basically this bolt will go through the brake, through the stud, and into the frame and hold it in place. So place the 990 on the seat stay, right over the welding and where you can see the threads. So I recommend a little bit of grease both on the 990 post and here on the actual inside of the brake, just so everything is nice and lubed up and there's no binding. Okay, so place the 990 on the seat stay, place the brake on the 990 post, and then thread the bolt through the post and into the frame. So here's where you'll need the 13mm wrench. You basically hold the spring cap, and then with the 5mm Allen, just give it a few good spins. All right, so once it's nice and snug, basically place the 13mm wrench here. You're gonna be tightening and loosening the spring. If you turn it clockwise, it'll tighten it, and if you turn it counterclockwise, it'll loosen the spring. So basically the brake spring cap will actually adjust the spring on the inside of the brake. And I like to position it at about a 6 or 6/15 position, and that adds a little bit of tension without it being dramatic and like forcing your fingers to have a workout. So again, place this at about a 615 position, tighten down the 6mm bolt, and then test her out. So as you can see, it's pretty springy, but it's not gonna be overly springy to where it's gonna force your finger to like constantly be working out when hitting the brakes. Again, it's really important. When the bike is upside down, you wanna make sure that you put the right brake arm first, because that's gonna be the one that's gonna be underneath. Then, you wanna install the right brake arm. Again, you want a little bit of grease both on the actual 90 post and on the bottom side of the brake. Then you can place the post on the inside of the brake, and then you wanna make sure that the concave part of the post makes good contact with the convex part of the post that's sitting on the seat stay, and then place the bolt through the brake and the post. Then give her a nice little finger tighten, and then you're ready to use a 6mm and again, the 13mm wrench to hold the brake cap in place. All right, one thing to keep in mind when you're working on the brakes, usually wherever your drivetrain is, the chain might be in the way when you're actually trying to tighten it down. Since the Fit Vegan model is a left-hand drive, I'm installing the left brake arm right now, and as you can see, the chain is kind of like a little bit in the way when I'm tightening it, so it makes it a little cumbersome, but you can still get through. You just gotta use really small turns. All right, now that it's nice and snug, you're gonna place your 13mm wrench. And again, turning it counterclockwise will tighten up the spring. Turning it clockwise will loosen it. So we're gonna turn it about a 6 o'clock position, then tighten her down. You don't wanna over tighten this because you can actually destroy your spring. So again, keep this the nice 6 o'clock and then turn the 6mm Allen to like a nice snug position. And then when you're tightening up the 5mm Allen bolt here, you want to do so in a snug manner. You don't want to over tighten it because that will compress the spring. So whether you're turning the brake spring cap or the bolt, there's a lot of pressure that goes on the spring. And again, you don't want to do it too tightly. All right, it's nice and snug. And then we test her out. And when you're testing out the left brake arm, you actually have to lift the right one a little bit, and then you can actually push this one and see how much spring back you have. And that feels pretty good. All right, so next up, we're gonna get this brake guide on the frame. And as you can see, the brake cable will slide through here. There's just a little bolt that'll go here, and this will all thread onto the frame right over there. And when installing this little tab, you'll see that it has a little pin that basically goes right here on the frame. And then the bolt will thread on the other hole. And as you can see, just tighten her up using a 2.5mm Allen. All right, so next up, we're gonna get the brake lever on here. And I'm sorry if you guys are left-handed, but the majority of brake levers are right-handed. If you really want a left-hand one, then you can actually flip it. It doesn't feel that good. People do make left-hand ones, but most complete bikes don't come with a right-hand lever, so it's something you have to get aftermarket. All right, so this is pretty straightforward. Turn the lever over, remove the bolt, open up the hinge, then place it on the handlebar. Place the bolt underneath here. It's very important that you always finger tighten things first. You wanna make sure that the threads catch nice and easily just using your hand strength. And then you can use a wrench or an Allen to make sure it tightens up nicely. So this feels nice and smooth. Tighten her down. We're only gonna mock it up for now. Once we flip the bike over, then we can really position it. So for now, just tighten it nice and snug, but nothing too crazy. And like we did earlier, we're gonna make sure the barrel, the adjuster, and the lever all line up properly. Pull the brake cable out of the housing, pull the lever back, place the hammer on the inside of the lever, make sure that the slits line up, and then pull the cable all the way down and position the brake cable, and then release the lever. All right, it's a little hard to see because the bike is upside down now, but when I flip it over, it'll make more sense. But usually once I place the brake cable on the lever, and again, the lever is on the right hand, I swing the cable over onto the left side, and that's where I'm gonna put the cable on the frame. So it's gonna wrap around the handlebar and be positioned on the left side. All right, because I'm using a bike stand, I'm gonna have to slip the cable and kind of feed it underneath, then pull it on the other side. Then you place the barrel adjuster on the actual guide, and the brake cable fed through the actual housing and the barrel adjuster nicely. This brake cable has already been cut to the predisposed size, but if you need to make any adjustments, all you have to do is remove the brake cable and then cut the end of the housing to the length that you want your cable to be, and then refeed the cable through the housing and then pull her through. It's pretty straightforward. All right, so as you can see on the straddle bolt, there's a really tiny little hole right there, and that's where we're gonna feed the cable through, and then we're gonna tighten the bottom piece, and this is actually gonna pinch the cable and hold it in place. So let's get that going. All right, so again, slip the brake cable into this little hole, and it's very easy when it's a new cable. And if it's not a new cable, then you're gonna wanna take your cutters here and make sure that you give it a nice and smooth cut. That way it's easy to get it through the bolt. But if this cable is frayed, then you can basically just take your wire cutters and snip the little piece off and make sure it's nice and straight. And that'll make it so it's easy to put through this little tiny hole. Like I said, I've removed these brakes already so I can see where it's been crimped before. So I'm gonna position it back there. But basically you always wanna have about an inch of cable that comes out of the straddle, and that's so you can have adjustments later. Now you tighten up the straddle using your 10mm wrench. And it's a lot easier if you have two of them. That way you can have a 10mm holding on this side and a 10mm holding on that side. But you can actually get it pretty tight with your hand. And then if you really, really need to, then get another 10 and then hold it from here and then tighten it down. All right, so now that the straddle is in place, you get the straddle cable that's already on the brake, basically wrap it around the seat post and then position it underneath the brake cable and onto the actual tabs that are on the straddle, and then pull it around back, and then pull the brake, and then pull around back, and then you might have to push the brake a little bit, and then position the little hammer on the open slit on the 990. And now she's all mocked up and ready for final adjustments. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you could use another wrench to really make sure that the straddle is on there tight because you don't want it slipping. So place either an adjustable wrench or another 10mm here, and then tighten her down, make sure it's nice and tight. And then you want to do the same for the bolt that's on the 990. Make sure that this 10mm bolt is nice and tight, and that'll hold the straddle cable in place. All right, as I mentioned before, these are the brake pads, and basically you want these to be towed in. And basically what that means is that you want the brake pad to be slightly angled into the rim and not just to be flat on it. And the reason for that is that when it's spinning, you want the first point to touch and then basically grab on the brake pad, and the momentum will force the brake pad to basically, the back end will really clamp down and hold the rim in place. All right, as I mentioned, everything is gonna make more sense when the bike is flipped over. So I'm gonna be doing the final adjustments with the bike in its right side up position. So first off, I'm gonna adjust the brake lever, and I wanna adjust the brake lever to where it's at a nice distance from my fingers and where it's not too high up, because then your hand will be like turned up. You want the lever to be in a position where you're normally gripping the bar. So as you can see, my wrist is slightly turned forward and it's at a good distance from my fingers, so I'm ready to tighten it down. All you gotta do is tighten up this bolt back here using a 5mm Allen. All right, nice and snug, and you're all set there. Then you wanna use either a Velcro piece, which Fit has provided, or a zip tie to make sure that this cable is nice and secured to the frame. All right, so either place a zip tie or the Velcro strap, tighten her up, and as I mentioned, I have the lever on the right here, and the final adjustments on the brake are by turning this barrel adjuster counterclockwise so that it kind of extends this cable a little bit, and then you turn the adjustment part on the barrel clockwise just to lock it in place. And as you can see, I have a little gap here. Then you come down on the underside of the top tube, you pull the barrel and the cable back a little bit, and then you just turn the nut or adjuster piece on the barrel to the right to add a little bit of gap as well. And as you can see, I've added about a 3-turn gap. And then when you squeeze the brake lever, you'll feel that the distance from the pads to the rim has been decreased, and that makes it so that the brakes are tighter feeling and more responsive. And that should about cover all the ins and outs and how to remove and how to install brakes. Like always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's any questions, please leave them in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like it or share it. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. As always, thank you very much for watching, and tune in for tomorrow's webisode or vlog. All right, guys, much love. Peace.